Leclerc's performance in Bahrain is unbelievable. He started from the front row and finished off the podium. What went wrong at Ferrari? Today I'm telling you the whole truth behind the 2025 Bahrain GP, Ferrari's dubious decisions, the strategy that killed the podium, and how McLaren and Norris robbed Leclerc of his dream in the final laps. The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix represented a clear opportunity for Ferrari to change its narrative for the season. After a difficult start, with results far below expectations, the Italian team invested heavily in a package of technical updates for the SF-25. Charles Leclerc arrived at the secure circuit with the pressure on and the urgent need to prove that Ferrari could still be competitive. Since free practice, the feeling in the paddock was that something had changed in Maranello. The car was more stable, with better response in medium and high-speed corners, and this was reflected in qualifying on Saturday. Leclerc achieved a surprising third place. It was a solid error-free lap, where he squeezed every thousandth of a second out of the new aerodynamic package. But the most shocking thing was his statement after getting out of the car. Leclerc acknowledged that he himself hadn't expected this result. He admitted that he had been patient in Q1 and Q2, waiting for the ideal moment to attack in Q3, just when the track offered its best grip. That strategy, that perfect reading of the conditions, led him to a third place, a position that later became second after George Russell's penalty. That front row position set off alarm bells among rivals and renewed hope within Ferrari. For the first time in weeks, it seemed the SF-25 had something to say. There was talk in the pits of a more balanced car, with less understeer and a more predictable response in slow corners, something that had been a handicap for Leclerc in the first races of the year. The Italian press made it clear in their headlines on Sunday morning, Ferrari had a real chance of a podium finish. The chassis improvements, the new floor profiles, and the more efficient airflow management were working at least for one lap. Everything pointed to this being the turning point of the season. There was tension, expectation. One question lingered in the air: what if this time it did? Because when a Ferrari sneaks onto the front row of the grid, Formula One feels it. And when that Ferrari is Charles Leclerc's, the driver who has carried the hopes of an entire team for years, every detail counts. The opportunity was ripe. The stage was perfect. But in Formula One, nothing is guaranteed. And what promised to be a brilliant day would turn into another story of frustration. The race began with a decision that, at first glance, seemed strategic. Ferrari opted to place Charles Leclerc on medium tires, while his main rivals, including George Russell, started on soft tires. At first glance, it seemed like a masterstroke, lengthening the first stint, having more consistent tires in the race, and forcing a different approach that would allow them to attack in the closing laps. But this move actually hit a deeper problem. From the start, it was clear that something wasn't working. Leclerc, starting from second place, failed to capitalize on his place on the front row. On the contrary, he was quickly overtaken by several drivers who took advantage of the greater initial traction offered by the soft tires. In the opening meters, the gap between the two compounds was abysmal. While the soft tires allowed for strong acceleration from the start, the medium tires took a while to warm up. And in Bahrain, with an abrasive track and changing conditions, this delay proved fatal. Leclerc lost positions he shouldn't have lost. In just a couple of corners, the Ferrari went from aiming for the lead to finding itself stuck in traffic. And in Formula One, a bad start affects your entire strategy. Because when you get into dirty air behind other cars with higher tire and brake temperatures, the margin for reaction is reduced. The initial strategy begins to deteriorate from the first lap. And this is where the big question arises. Why did Ferrari opt for the mediums? Some experts point to overconfidence in the durability of the compound, thinking that the degradation of the softs would be too high to maintain a competitive pace. Others believe Ferrari sought to strategically differentiate itself against a car that, although improved, was still a step behind Red Bull and McLaren in pure race conditions. It was an attempt to find a niche in the strategy to do something different. But sometimes different isn't the right thing to do. Leclerc, for his part, tried to stay in the fight. Despite the poor start, he began to recover positions with aggressive maneuvers, including a spectacular overtake of Lando Norris at turn 4 on the outside, taking advantage of the DRS. It was the purest Leclerc, determined, incisive, fearless. But even his talent couldn't compensate for the team's strategic limitations. The tire choice not only affected the start, but also dragged the rest of the race into uncertain territory. By that point, Ferrari was already on the defensive, reacting rather than controlling. The script had completely changed. What should have been a race of attacking transformed into one of endurance. And in modern Formula One, that usually means one thing: losing the battle. And that was just the beginning of the problem. The real strategic fallout was yet to come. The decisive moment of the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix wasn't an on-track maneuver. It wasn't an overtake or a driver error. It was a pit stop. It was a strategic decision that completely changed Charles Leclerc's destiny. The safety car, which appeared opportunely right in the middle of the race, offered an opportunity to adjust the strategy. For some, it was the perfect window to gain positions. For Ferrari, it was the trap they fell into all by themselves. Up until that point, Leclerc had been making up ground. With a medium tire strategy, the Monegasque had planned a second stint also on mediums and finish on softs. That was the agreed-upon route. A conservative but logical strategy, designed to maximize performance in the final third of the race, when the car would be lighter and the softs could make a difference. But the safety car changed everything. Ferrari reacted quickly. Too quickly. They called Leclerc into the pits and fitted hard tires. A decision that, on paper, seemed rational, not to stop again, go all the way and try to resist. But that logic didn't consider the most important thing. The hard tires weren't working well in Bahrain. Verstappen had proven it in the early stages of the race. They knew it at Mercedes, they knew it at McLaren. Everyone knew it, except Ferrari. At Mercedes, for example, they decided to take a risk with soft tires for Russell. A compound that, while it could degrade further, offered an immediate advantage in pace. Russell flew. Leclerc, on the other hand, sank in pace. He said it himself after the race. He wasn't fast on the hard tires. And it's not just about speed. It's about feeling. It's about confidence. And Charles didn't have it. The secure track is one of the most abrasive on the calendar. It demands a lot of traction, a lot of stability, especially in the hard braking zones. And the hard tires, cold after the safety car, didn't deliver any of that. Leclerc lost temperature, lost pace, and with it lost any real chance of a podium. But the problem wasn't just technical. It was philosophical. Ferrari didn't react like a team that wants to win. He reacted like a team that wants to minimize damage. And in Formula One, that difference is crucial. While McLaren and Mercedes were thinking about how to attack, Ferrari was thinking about how to resist. That mentality, that approach, was what truly doomed Leclerc. The experts warned after the race. The time to make a difference was there, at that pit stop. Switch to soft tires, take the risk, trust the driver. But Ferrari chose the safe route. They chose the slow route. And in modern Formula One, poorly managed safety is synonymous with mediocrity. Leclerc returned to the track, but he no longer had the tools to fight. From that moment on, his race stopped being a fight for the podium and became a fight for survival. The safety car, which for many was a blessing, was the beginning of the end for Ferrari. Ferrari arrived in Bahrain with a promise under its belt, a package of updates that, according to the team, would mark the true start of its season. The hitherto inconsistent SF-25 received its first serious package of improvements. A new flat bottom with redesigned edges, bodywork tweaks, and a revised cooling system. All this was accompanied by a new rear wing, designed to generate more downforce without sacrificing top speed. In theory, the car was supposed to be more efficient, more stable, and faster. And at times it seemed that way. In qualifying, the improvements seemed to work. Leclerc managed to place the Ferrari in third place, later transformed into second due to a penalty for George Russell. This performance was no coincidence. The rear-end stability in fast corners improved. The car showed better transition between sectors, and the extra load allowed Leclerc to attack with more confidence during his flying lap. But that was where the magic ended. Because in the race the picture was different. Ferrari was again the same as in the first races, competitive over one lap, vulnerable on Sunday's pace. Degradation remained high. Balance in race conditions, especially on hard tires, was lacking again. And the long-awaited improvements couldn't prevent McLaren from gaining a clear lead in the final laps. Leclerc was very clear in his post-race evaluation. He appreciated the team's work but didn't sell smoke. He openly stated that the updates hadn't been a huge step, but a small gain. A technical detail that added up, yes, but not enough to change the hierarchy. He even admitted that the Bahrain circuit wasn't ideal for measuring the real impact of the improvements, hinting that perhaps at tracks like Jeddah or Imola more could be seen. Lewis Hamilton, for his part, was more positive. He spoke of a more solid, more stable-feeling car. But that perception clashed with the harsh reality of race times. In terms of pure pace, Ferrari was still behind. Even with the new aerodynamic package, the team still can't compete on equal terms with McLaren or Red Bull. Not on long runs. Not on worn tires. Not in dirty air. And that raises a troubling dilemma. If this was the first major upgrade package for the SF-25, and the leap was barely perceptible, how much real room for improvement does this car have? How much potential remains to be unlocked? Or are we looking at a car with too low a ceiling to challenge for anything more than occasional podium finishes? Team principal Fred Vasseur tried to calm the situation by assuring everyone that these updates were part of a long-term plan, and that the next improvements planned for Imola will focus on the weaknesses already identified: downforce in slow corners, thermal efficiency, and wear management on hard tires. But that's for the future. In the present, the truth is that the improvements in Bahrain were more wishful thinking than reality. A step forward, yes, but a short step in a race where the rest are already racing. The 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix was, for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, a precise snapshot of their current situation. A weekend that began with hope, with a qualifying that restored Maranello's pride, but ended in disappointment, with a fourth-place finish that felt more like defeat than progress. The technical updates worked, but weren't enough. Leclerc found pace but lacked the weapons to defend himself. The team made strategic decisions that, far from pushing them forward, left them exposed. In Formula One, small mistakes are amplified. And at Ferrari, those mistakes have been repeating themselves for years. Losing a podium in the final laps hurts. But what hurts more is the feeling that history is repeating itself. That when it really matters, Ferrari isn't where it should be. That the talent of Leclerc, one of the fastest drivers over one lap in the championship, continues to be wasted on poorly executed strategies, on cars that promise more than they deliver. And yet, there are signs of life. Leclerc has begun to find his way with the SF-25. His work with the engineers, testing with different setups, his way of reading the track are bearing fruit. You can't see that in the results, but it's noticeable in the way he's driving. You can see it in how he qualifies. You can see it in how he fights in the race, even when the car isn't supporting him. Ferrari, for its part, has a duty to act. Not about reacting. About anticipating. About leaving behind that habit of making conservative decisions, of thinking about minimizing damage instead of maximizing performance. Because today's Formula One doesn't wait for anyone. And if you don't evolve quickly, you become a spectator of your own failure. The 2025 championship is still in its early stages. There's still time. But the margin for error shrinks with each race. What happened in Bahrain can't happen again. Not if Ferrari wants to win again. Not if Leclerc wants to fulfill his destiny. Because this team, this history, and this driver aren't built to celebrate fourth places. They're built to fight for the top. And it's time they started proving it.